For years, I found myself hating life. This seems to resonate with a lot of people on the internet, Reddit especially. Life was boring, controlled by these men who rolled around in cash while the rest of us worked as slaves to jobs we didn't care about, for bosses who mistreated us, with coworkers who acted polite because they had to. I worked in a call center until my ears couldn't take it, and eventually made the lateral move to retail just over a year ago. The change was helpful, being in a new situation to get some new stimuli. But as with all retail jobs, it began to suck the life out of me. What sapped the zest from my life away even faster was my always obvious singleness. No one would date me, and I could hardly see myself being good enough to move in with, let alone handle for more than 5 minutes. My room was covered in empty bags of chips, Xbox game discs, plates, utensils, and everything else you'd expect to find me snacking on. My roommates were all in college, but I wasn't. They took classes together and had known each other since high school. I just happened to answer their ad online to help split the rent 4 ways instead of 3. They didn't care for me at all, and that was fine. I didn't care for them either. In short, I was one big sloppy mess of a person. I just couldn't find a love for life like I had as a kid. When I was younger, I had dreams and desires. I wanted to build things, create games for people, make people laugh, make people understand the things I was passionate about. That had all died out. I shuffled through life like a metaphorical zombie that's become a meme in itself lately. Life saps your energy, but you have to keep shuffling to stay alive. Just keep shuffling. I had been raised in a Christian household, but grew out of the idea of God. Or, at least, I just didn't think about it often enough to count myself as religious. But after a particularly grueling day of work, I began to think a lot about God. And the past. Why would a God create an entire planet only to have so many people suffer on it? Why offer hope when it was so obvious that suffering outweighed happiness? Was God yet another rich man, rolling around in his power and the praises of those who slaved away on his planet? I thought my way out of my belief in God and instead came to a different conclusion. All of this was probably an accident. An unlikely accident, but an accident all the same. But even if it came to an existence by accident, there were still forces acting on the model universe that we live in. And there was one power that gave all of the other forces their power. Time. If time stopped functioning, gravity would have no effect. Neither would energy. Everything would be paused, unable to exert their powers without time's influence. If the engine of time stopped running, everything else would stop too. I threw the idea around my head for a while, and even came to the odd conclusion that if we should believe that anything is sentient, if anything is worth praying to, it is time itself. Time, or whatever runs it, has quite a few attributes of a just God. It has no favorites. Time acts on all. Time heals your wounds just as often as it causes them. Time keeps you living and breathing. Time gives us freedom, as opposed to there being no time at all. My trains of thought weren't entirely serious, but I did begin to think that I might be onto something. Not sure what, but something. I began to find connections to the world that I could relate to time being a sentient creature who rules over, doing its job to perfection. One Friday night, I came home completely pissed off and depressed. I applied to be a store manager somewhere. Yeah, it wasn't a job out of retail, but it was still a leg up. They'd hired someone who had been working at the chain for less time than I had. I had to hear the news through the coworker grapevine. They didn't even bother to email me directly to tell me I was rejected. I was so angry. So I started to drink to forget my week. I raged and tried to play video games to smooth over my anger. Blasting the roughest music I could find, I played aggressively and yelled when I lost. It felt good to let it all out. My roommates knocked twice to try to get me to shut up, but I answered belligerently. They gave up. At one point, At the end of my rampage, I found myself scrolling through my old Facebook posts, back when I was younger. I even found photos of myself as a kid from my mom's page. I looked long and hard at my younger self, remembering how much more hopeful I had been. And for the first time in years, I felt an urge to pray, to plead with a higher power to change my circumstances and my life. And with all my recent philosophical thoughts, what better candidate than time? Why not pray to time itself? Would it answer? Would it care that I was hurting? What could it do for me even if it did care? My drunken mind didn't bother to think through those questions. I just dropped off my bed, tears streaming, and I got on my knees like I had been taught to as a kid. I remember the beginning, but not the rest. Time. 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 Do you see what's become of me? I blabbered on and on about everything and anything I could complain about. I told time that I wanted to end it all because there was no meaning left for me. I complained to time that humanity should be doing more than this, that it should be worth more than this. Instead of slavery to each other, we should be doing better. I was pretty damn drunk, I know. I was crying out the summation of my thoughts the last few months, just dumping everything. Still sobbing along, a feeling made me hesitate. A prickle on my neck. My shoulders wanted to scrunch up instinctively, but I didn't let them. This didn't feel right. My eyes were closed, my fingers were interlaced on the bed, and my knees were bent below me. I started to shake without explanation. A small flutter of wind hit my face, and I recoiled and opened my eyes. Something moved. To my left, something shot just out of sight. I whirled my head to follow it, but it stayed in my peripheral. My head followed it until I turned all the way around to face my window. The light outside was blue. Blue like the color of an iceberg when photographed underwater. The light was radiant and created beams through the dust. A muffled thought came up, making me think that maybe this was just some asshole with super bright LEDs on his car, and they were angled up too high right into my window on the ground floor. I got up to open the blinds and check, because while that would have been a good enough explanation, I didn't believe it. My hand shook when I grabbed the blinds and lowered them. Where was this paranoia coming from? The second I split the blinds, my hands fell away. I froze, my throat clenching up, feeling so overwhelmed and ready to scream that my throat wouldn't allow it. The effect wore off after a few steps away from the window, to the point that I forgot what I even saw. Which is why I made the insane move of reapproaching the window. Instead of peering through the blinds, I grabbed the string and drew them all the way open in one quick yank. Everything was colorized in that same iceberg blue. Only, it wasn't the parking lot outside. It was everything. The outside changed constantly, flickering like a glitched-out television. But if I focused, it slowed enough for me to see with perfect clarity. My concentration gave way multiple times, like a rope slipping out of my grasp, and the images flashed faster. I saw something I could try to describe, but I think I'd be wrong. I saw each singular person rise from birth until they stooped with old age and dropped back into the ground. I saw entire cities and towns and neighborhoods follow the same pattern. Not just people, but buildings and trees and animals and entire mountains. Everything rose and fell like a great engine. Every person, animal, tree, object, everything was a piston that drove the engine of time. And time consumed them all happily, not happy like an evil enjoyment, but a child's happiness. innocent. Joyous and innocent. I didn't just see people. I saw other things. Beings I'd never seen before. Some lived on the fringes, just outside of our own world. Some lived far away. I could still see them, but they were so far away. But near or far, evil or good, they followed the same pattern, some taking longer than others. But eventually they fell to power the engine of time. The world's plates moved in my view, sliding together, following the same rhythmic circular pattern, also powering the engine. The planet Earth wobbled up and down in its orbit, powering the engine. The Earth spun around the sun, and even that motion powered the engine. Every star, every rock, every icy asteroid, all jumped up and down, spinning in orbit, unwillingly powering the engine. We all power the engine. We are all stuck in time's grasp. No way to stop it. No way to slow it. We feed time together when we get up and move or sit and mope. Time pushes us into motion, and we are forced to power it back by falling. We are driven by time, who lets us power it and gleefully watches it all happen with a childlike innocence. It doesn't understand. Everything powers the engine. Everyone powers the engine. I woke up on the floor in my room covered in puke. The window was wide open, but sunlight streamed in instead of iceberg blue light. I spent a long time staring at the window, wondering if I had dreamed it all, wondering if I'd ever drink again, wondering what had happened. I've questioned everything I saw and wrote it all down and read and reread it, trying to figure out if I imagined it all. I'm still convinced. I want to try again, but I'm terrified for more than a few reasons. If it was real, who or what showed it to me? And why? If it was real, then we are all unwilling and unknowingly slaves to a system, an engine driven by a being that has no idea what it's doing. I've stopped thinking of myself as a failure, though. There is no place where I should have been by now. There's no measurement stick that I'm falling short of. I'm just a piston, rising at the right speed, and I'll fall at the correct speed too. No matter what I do or don't do, my meaning and purpose exists, no matter what I do. I don't know what idea is worse. The world the way that it is, and either someone or something is over it all, controlling everything on purpose, or no one is controlling it and no one knows what they're doing. Regardless, we all rise from birth and fall into the grave like pistons in slow motion, all to power the machine, the engine of time.